Hey guys, this is John. I'm playing tachomex70 in the 15-minute pool on ICC. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Tachomex? I don't know. Okay, so he opens with e4. Let's play a French defense. I have played this before in the 15-minute category. Of course, it's not my go-to opening. I actually think this opening fits my style a bit, though. It leads to strategic positions that are often closed or semi-closed, and I like those. I feel at home in closed and semi-closed positions. Let's take a look at my opponent's stats. He has 160 games in the 15-minute pool. 85 wins, 70 losses, 5 draws. And he says in the chat, "Hola maestro, buenas tardes, gracias por jugar." He's saying hello and thank you for the game, so I'll tell him the same. I'll have to remember my Spanish. Okay, so he plays g3. That's quite an unusual move on move 2. So I can play d5, straightforward, attacking the pawn on e4. I could also play c5, whereupon we would probably get a closed Sicilian. I don't see what the problem with d5 is, so I'm just going to do that. If white takes, I'm obviously taking back with the e-pawn, and I'm happy. They play bishop g2, just defending the e4 pawn. I could take and then play the knight to f6. I could also just play knight f6 straight away, kind of leaning towards that. Let's do that. Attacking the e4 pawn twice. So if e5, knight fd7 will be the answer, and I'll be hitting that pawn again. And then white would probably support that pawn with f4 or d4, whereupon I could play c5 and get the knight to c6. Taking is still undesirable for white, I believe. I could just take back with my e-pawn. In the French, black is very much looking to get this light square bishop into the game, because by virtue of your first move, e6, you are somewhat diminishing the prospects of that piece. And this is the traditionally bad piece for black in the French. So if white takes on d5, I'm very happy to take with the pawn, and this bishop will be liberated from the chain. So my opponent does play e5. I'll play knight fd7. This move looks like it cramps black's position, but in return for a slight lack of coordination, you often obtain counterattacking prospects, specifically with this move c5. So now I'm going to advance and assault this d4 pawn. White has already created a chain here, stretching from e5 all the way to b2 now that they played c3, and I can start attacking this chain. So this is like an advanced French, or maybe a classical French, but with the bishop on g2, which is pretty unusual. It's an intriguing setup for white, though. I kind of like the look of playing b6 and then going bishop a6. Now that white's bishop has vacated the f1 a6 diagonal, maybe I should just take it for myself. I could also take on d4. Maybe even play a quick f6, although with white's knight on e2, I'm not sure how I feel about f6, because after a trade, or maybe even instead of a trade, white could play knight f4 and attack this pawn. b6 looks logical, though. Yeah, let's do b6. If I can bring my bishop to a6, then I'll be attacking the knight on e2, which is in turn defending the pawn on d4. So maybe I can indirectly pressure that d4 pawn. And in general, this just seems like a good reaction to white putting their bishop on this long diagonal. I don't really see how the bishop is going to be useful here. It is sort of out of the way of the center. You know, a lot of times that light square bishop is developed to like e2 or d3. d3 is a very common square. But unless there's some function for the bishop on g2, I can't possibly see how it's going to be useful attacking d5. I mean, maybe it would be more in the spirit of such a setup to play c4 and try to assault my d-pawn. That could be interesting if white decides to switch tack here and do that, but I doubt they will. I bet they'll just castle or do something like this. So now bishop a6. Note that I would have two undefended pieces if I play bishop a6, the bishop and also the knight on c6. White could attack it with queen a4, but I could always defend with queen c8. It would defend both pieces, or I could take on e2. So I'm not concerned about that option. The only thing I'm thinking is whether it's worth it to play a5 first. But I think bishop a6 straight away is simple and good. So with bishop e3, white is reinforcing their structure. That move means that if I take on e2, white can take back and they won't have to fear losing this pawn. Here I'm just thinking bishop e7 followed by castling. Might be worth it to play rook c8, but bishop e7 is just a normal developing move. Yeah, let's play it. White may consider playing f4, f5 in a bid to attack me. f4 would also help in stabilizing the pawn chain. It creates a stronghold on e5. So they do play it. So here I'm considering f5, trying to stop them from playing f5. Now that this square is occupied by a pawn, I'm not concerned about white bringing their knight into f4 and attacking e6. So I think I could get away with f5 if I wanted. Let's say f5, e takes f6 en passant. Let's say I take with the knight. Maybe knight d2, looking to play knight f3 and into e5. Knight g4 is very unpleasant for white, though. I like the look of f5. I think I'm going to do it. It's a good way just to solve the issue of white playing f5 as well. And should we get an en passant capture, I'm going to play knight takes, so I'm going to pre-move. Oh, actually, I don't want to pre-move that move. Never mind. Good thing I clicked away from that. Because it's likely white will not take this pawn. So if they play like knight d2 or something, it'd be a really bad idea to pre-move knight f6. That'd be a really good way to blow your winning streak, John. I've been doing awesome in the pool lately, and that would just be a fantastic way to immediately lose the game. Okay, so white does not take en passant. Probably I'll just castle. Yeah, no reason to think much further than that. So white has a undisputed space advantage, but with space comes the responsibility of maintaining that space. So I do have pressure on d4, and there's pawn tension here and here. And white would be unlikely to take on c5. They usually don't want to do that. King f2, wow. That's a bizarre move. I think what white has in mind with this move is an eventual kingside attack. I think they are trying to get their king out of the way, so maybe they can shift their rook over to, say, the g file, maybe move the bishop, and eventually play g4. It's a pretty risky idea for for white, rather. Maybe they just want the bishop defended, but I'm not in a position to attack this anyways. So this is questionable, just immediately. I'll probably play rook c8. Maybe they want the knight defended. Maybe they just want to play queen a4 or something, But the king is not usually the piece in a middle game, especially where nothing has been traded. You usually don't want your king participating too actively in the operations. You just want your king safe. But it would be an overreaction for me to try to punish this move, because you notice how close the position is. I'm probably not going to outright punish a move like king f2. I'm just going to play rook c8. Yeah, you can't read too far into moves that surprise you from your opponent's side, even if you sense that the move should be incorrect. You have to keep your bearings. Don't try to go out of your way to punish a move that may not have a refutation to begin with. Okay, so rook h1. So a pretty clear signal white is trying to do something on the king side. They also unpin their knight with that move. Here I see an interesting idea of taking on d4 and using either the c5 square or the b4 square to my advantage. So let's say I take d4, and they take with a pawn. Knight b4 is strong there, I believe, threatening knight d3. Also maybe knight c2. Yeah, those squares are weaknesses. They're light squares. They're hard for white to protect. So if I take d4, they might want to take with a knight. And how do I feel about that? I'd probably go knight c5 in that case, and I'm still threatening knight d3. I could also start this operation with bishop takes e2, but I think I want to keep this light square bishop. I don't think I want to trade it for that knight. Yeah, let's take. This looks like good timing on this capture. I'm not sure white properly considered the ramifications of this. And actually, for this matter, I maybe could have taken on the previous move, but I think it's helpful to have my rook bearing down the file. So they take with the knight. Maybe knight c5 now. If I take with my knight, they could recapture either way. Maybe they would take with the pawn now that I don't have knight b4. But knight c5 just looks good. Yeah, let's do that. So knight d3 is the obvious threat. We're also defending e6. So nice multi-purpose piece there. Also, someday we could get into e4 as well. It's a nice outpost square for us. It's defended by my f5 and d5 pawn. Time-wise, we're doing okay. 14 moves in. Still got over half our time. I suspect white should play bishop f1 to guard d3. But in playing bishop f1, they remove a defender of e4. That could be significant. But I really think they got to guard this vulnerable d3 square. I don't think they want to see knight d3 check. So right now I'm going to spend my time thinking what to do against bishop f1 because I think it's highly likely they play that. So bishop f1, I could play knight d3 check all the same. Bishop takes d3, bishop takes d3, but then I lose e6. Yeah, so that's important. If this knight moves away from c5, I lose e6. On bishop f1, I could just take on f1. So bishop takes. Let's say they take with a queen. Maybe they want to keep their rook on h1. Then I could take d4. They take with a pawn. I play knight e4 check. Knight takes, pawn takes. Just some simplifications. I think that works out well, but I don't see anything crushing there for black. Bishop d3 could be played. But then they might have knight takes e6, knight takes e6, and then take my bishop. So I don't like that. I think I'll probably just take on f1. Yeah, let's just take. A trade of bishops seems inevitable. I mean, moving my bishop back was out of the question, so. All right, now, do I take d4 or do I just let that simmer for now? Thing is, if I take d4 and they take with a pawn, I'm obligated to move this knight on the next move. I just think like maybe I want to hold off on knight e4. I'm not sure that I want to commit to that move yet. I'm thinking queen d7 could just be a good and flexible move right now. Overprotecting e6. If queen d7 is queen b5 at all a concern? I wouldn't think so. Yeah, I could always play even a6. I think queen takes b6. That queen is on the verge of being trapped. Yeah, I'm not worried about queen b5. Let's just do this. Patience. These weaknesses are not going anywhere. e4, d3. And psychologically, it's irritating for white to know that my knight could hop into e4 at any moment. That means that this knight is probably going to be glued to d2 to stop me. White may not like that. Connecting the rooks could better prepare knight takes d4 as well. My queen is looking at some squares on the queen side in that case. So maybe I could play, let's say, knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, and maybe even pass up the option to play knight e4 check in favor of like knight a4 going after the b2 pawn. And maybe with both rooks being ready to take posts down the c-file, that could be good. I say both rooks because with this queen having moved from d8 to d7, this rook is more able to come to c8. White still has some minor issues to solve. I think this whole plan of a kingside attack was optimistic for white. mean, yes, there are some scenarios where they could get like h3 and g4 in, or maybe h4, h5, h6, but the position would have to remain closed for a very long time, and black's counterplay would have to be close to nothing for that to work for white. So I think that whole operation with king f2 was flawed. We'll see when we check the analysis, of course. I'm not sure what white should do here. Maybe rook c1, preparing for a trade on d4, giving them some presence on the c file in the case that they want to take with the c pawn. I mentioned queen b5. Queen b5 just doesn't really threaten anything, though. I mean, maybe threatens to take c6, but the only reason to play queen b5 would be to discourage me from taking the knight on d4, which I actually could even do after queen b5 if I really wanted, because my queen is defended by that knight. But more likely after queen b5, I'd be looking at moves like a6, and I really feel that queen is close to being trapped if her queen takes b6. They do play it. All right, so we'll get our wish. We'll get to calculate something here. So if a6, queen takes b6, where is my trap? Bishop d8 hangs the knight on c5. Rook b8 hangs the knight on c6. So we can't play either one of those moves. Knight a4 hangs the a6 pawn. We could play a6, queen takes b6, knight takes d4. And then, let's say bishop takes. I mean, rook b8 looks pretty good there, threatening rook takes b2. I don't believe queen b5. I gotta be honest. I don't think queen takes b6 after a6 is likely to happen. I mentioned earlier how you don't want to react to certain moves, but I don't think this is an overreaction to play a6. So if a6 queen takes, my idea will be knight takes d4. And if pawn takes, I think rook b8 is still good there. Queen a5, at the very least I can go check and go take b2. They might win a6, but their king is probably going to be open in that case. Just quickly, I'll look at alternatives to a6, like knight takes d4 I mentioned, queen takes d7, knight takes d7. Fine for me, but nothing special. Knight takes e5 does not work, pawn takes, and their queen is defended. Knight e4 check doesn't make a difference. Okay, let's do this. Let's see what you're made of. They're either going to play queen takes b6 or drop the queen back, probably to e2. In which case we can claim to have played a useful move. Yeah, so white bailed out. Maybe they're just not sure what to do themselves, so they're just going to play a useful move in their eyes. Okay, so now I'm thinking b5, just start advancing on the queen side. If b5, knight takes c6, let's say rook takes c6. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's just go b5. So I viewed the last couple moves as just a way to help me move my pawns forward on the queen side. So queen b5 looks a little superficial. It might have been okay for white because, you know, white was having a hard time figuring out anything else to do anyways. I do want to bear in mind that white could potentially play a4, trying to disturb my pawn structure. It doesn't work at the moment because my knight could take on a4, but I want to keep that in mind. Okay, now important decision. Which way do I take? Queen or rook? Both moves have merit. My instinct says rook, but queen takes, maybe d4 in the future when my queen is peering into white's position could be annoying. So if rook takes, bishop takes c5 check, bishop takes c5 check, king g2, can I just play d4 and break through? Because that's what I would like to do. Pawn takes d4, bishop takes d4, knight f3. That might be okay for white. Whereas queen takes, bishop takes c5, bishop takes c5 check, king g2, I have d4 check then. I don't want to spend a ton of time here, but it's a concern, the difference between these two moves. So rook takes, bishop takes check, king over. I still think that's better for black, even if I don't go for d4. But I also get the sense that they really want to play bishop takes c5. I just foresee them eager to play that move. Okay, let's take with a rook. Can't spend all day thinking about that. I think this is technically the better move. Although in a bullet game, I probably would have played queen takes. Yeah, he does take here. Okay, so let's take with check. King g2 will be played. King f3, wow. Nah, that's clearly bad. Okay, now I really want to play d4. Because queen d5 check is coming. I have no idea why you would go to f3 instead of g2, the much safer square. This move I can play almost without thinking. It's a given. It's almost like white is provoking me with these king moves. That scenario I just mentioned where you want to play a certain move because you think it's likely your opponent will play a suboptimal reply, that happens a lot. I wanted to play queen takes c6 because I thought that better set me up for bishop takes c5. But in my heart of hearts, I know rook takes c6 is better because that prepares the doubling of the rooks. It's just a more constructive move. But we'll see. Maybe the engine won't find much of a difference between them. Now white should probably get their king back to safety, like king g2, but at the very least I can take c3 and create a weakness here. So if king g2, I could play pawn d3, but then queen f3 covers this diagonal. The position is pretty close still, so yeah, probably I'll take on c3, and then maybe play a move like bishop a3, uncovering an attack on c3. It'll be nice when his king is exposed. My king is safely tucked away at all times. g4. White continues their provocative play. So queen d5 check, there's king g3. I could take g4, that completely draws the king out in the open. I could also play pawn d3. Kind of leaning towards pawn d3. But d3, queen g2. Then I could check, they can move their king, take, and then we take g4 at the end. That's good, I'm sure. There's so many good options here. Even g5. g5 looks pretty powerful too. Just bust open the position. Maybe d3, queen g2, and then g5. That could be some serious punishment. Yeah, let's play d3. Time is ticking down. Yeah, and now I'm going to do this move. I know that opens my king, but I really like how this looks. They take. Okay, so now we take here. If knight e4, I just take f4. And note they're pinned, so what are they going to do about the f-pawn? Maybe I could have played queen d5 check, but this move looks natural and strong, so I just went for it. Probably they got to play king g3 here. It looks just bad. I could take f4 check, but they had their king on h3 with check on my king. Now, king g3 I don't think I should take, actually. Or if I do take, it should be with the rook. King g3 I probably will play bishop e3, or maybe a move like queen f7, although this is hanging. Queen e8, maybe? Their king is in the danger zone, and they can't go to the e-file either. My pawn controls e2, the bishop controls e3. Okay, so they're just trying to give the pawn and move on with their life. Makes sense. So if queen e8, king g3, queen h5, they take here. I don't really want to calculate that line. I'm sure it's good, but I don't want to calculate it. Maybe rook c8. And they get their knight into e4. I gotta make up my mind soon, though. I might just choose a practical option here. Yeah, let's just do this. And then let's take here. Because if they take with a rook, we take g2 and we just win.
Check.
Oh, they hung their queen. Okay, well, that's game over. They had to play king h3, but I was just going to take g2 check, king takes, and I guess I could take e5 there at the end. Yeah, because if rook takes f4, I'd have rook e2 check. I feel like my time management could have been a bit better as the position got sharp. This is one weakness I have. In really good positions, I want to sit there and try to calculate the absolute best way to win. But, you know, white's position is so sketchy, I probably should just choose something and go with it. g5 seemed reckless, but I think that move is sound. I'm threatening to take g4 and then take f4. Okay, so let's go back and take a look. So French defense, and yeah, bizarre option from white with g3 allowing d5. I'm sure black can equalize in multiple ways. You know, it's possible black already is equal after g3. Thought about c5 too, taking it into a closed Sicilian, but d5 is direct. And as I said, this piece is bad for black into French most of the time, so if white takes on d5, that should be a small victory for black because now my bishop can come outside the pawn chain. So here I just played knight f6. Taking also comes to mind, but knight f6, e5. Now in traditional French style, I start undermining white's center using my flank pawn, my c-pawn. Knight c6. And they played knight e2. And I do think this is a good way to tackle this scenario with the bishop on g2. So to counter by putting my bishop on a6. Because otherwise on b7 it's not going to be useful. The bishop isn't going to come out this way anymore because of the locked center. So a6 seems to be its best square, and I like that it'll have free reign on this diagonal. You saw how strong that bishop was on this diagonal. And eventually white played bishop f1 to trade it anyways. Let's add the engine here. So b6, they played bishop e3, bishop a6, castle. Yep, I just played bishop e7, and now f4. Maybe f5 is not a concern yet. The engine says just castle, and then if f5, bishop g5 looking to trade the bishops, and black can keep their structure intact. I don't know, though. f5 seemed fine to me. The engine gives a slim advantage to white. I know I deprive myself of the ability to attack the center with f6, but at the same time, I never have to concern myself with white's kingside attack, at least not as far as the f-pawn. Maybe they can still organize g4 or something like they were trying to do in the game with that whole king f2 idea, but this move does bring a certain peace of mind to the position. So knight d2, I castled. Yeah, now this move, king f2, I think that's clearly bad, as you can see. It's just not good timing on this. White still has basic, position maintenance things they need to do, like bring this rook to c1, maybe bring this knight somewhere like f3. So king f2 is inappropriate under these circumstances. And it's just a very optimistic move in general, expecting to whip up a kingside attack. Yes, the position's closed, but it's not closed enough that you can just bring your king towards the center and expect everything to work out for you. So, yeah, and actually here, I played rook c8, but it's possible that this was just stronger straight away. I probably missed the mark on this one. Yeah, because the point is, by doing it in this move order, if pawn takes, there's still knight b4, and I can try to utilize this square. And if knight or bishop takes, well, if knight takes, this rook is still remaining on f1, so that would just hang the rook after knight takes, and they recapture. So if white wants to recapture effectively on d4, looks like they might have to do it with the bishop, but that also doesn't look too good either. I mean, knight here is probably strong, trying to come into d3. I don't think they want to part with the dark square bishop. That looks especially bad, especially now that they have no king safety to speak of. So yeah, I missed the boat here. I could have taken on d4 first. Instead, I played rook c8 and maybe gave them a chance to recover. Rook h1 didn't really help their cause, but yeah, maybe knight f3, helping to better control this. I suspect this is still pretty good. Knight f takes, okay, because this knight is still pinned. Knight c5, this looks kind of similar to the game. Wow, knight takes e6. Huh. And then if take, bishop takes d5, pinning here. Well, queen d7 did help diffuse that. I don't think I saw that tactical idea in the game. I wonder if that was ever possible for white. Probably not, but we'll see. But yes, very clear that rook c8 was a slight mistake, and I could have taken advantage. Yeah, I was talking about how you don't want to overreact, but yeah, king f2, it looks like there's just a direct punishment for it with c takes d4. Better to act now when this knight is pinned and cannot recapture on d4. So rook h1, now I did take. Yeah, and this looks similarly bad, if not worse now for white, because my rook is participating down the c-file. And there's still knight to d3 check and knight c2 to consider. So white correctly took with a knight. I played knight c5. The engine says this is better. Yeah, but what happens after pawn takes? Knight c5. Wow. Yeah, I didn't see that. That's a cool move. So still striving for d3. And the point is, if white takes it, then we get in d4 and bye-bye bishop, which is a necessary defensive piece for white. As you saw in the game, when that dark square bishop goes away, white's king is very much in danger. This opens the position right up in black's favor. That's a cool operation. Yeah, I didn't see that. So hence I didn't trade on d4 because I wanted to preserve this knight. So I just played the immediate knight c5. Bishop f1, white trades. I played queen d7. And now white came in with the queen b5. And I played a6. They dropped the queen back. So let's see what happens if queen takes b6, because I thought I would have some good continuation against this, but I wasn't entirely sure. Yeah, this is the move I was thinking of. And then let's say pawn takes. Rook c6 is best. Okay, chasing the queen. Queen a5, knight d3 check, and probably just go gather the pawn, huh? King g2, rook b8. Rook b8. Maybe this is more unpleasant for the queen. Yeah, this queen doesn't have a lot of squares to work with, does it? This is covered. a3 is covered by my bishop. There's ideas like bishop b4 and simply taking on b2 also in mind. Maybe rook c2 and bishop b4, attacking this pinned knight. White does not want to venture down this path. I was pretty sure when I played a6 they were not going to take on b6, but it's interesting to see the refutation if they had. So here I played b5. So for as much flack as I've been giving white for that plan, starting with king f2 and rook h1, their position's not that bad. I think mainly because I missed a couple moments to capitalize. But it's still pretty pleasant for black, but maybe white can hold on here. Okay, so here I had this dilemma, rook takes or queen takes. I spent a minute and a half on this. It may not just matter that much. Probably doesn't. I thought rook takes is better because that paves the way for the rook to come here or maybe to b8 in preparation for b4. But I really wanted to play this move. Point being that after take and take, and the king steps here or here, then d4 is coming immediately with check. It probably doesn't matter too much, though, because on queen takes c6, you never know. White might adjust, and they may not take this knight. They might just do some other move. Although, even if they do some other move, it's kind of nice for me, isn't it? Because they still can't really come here or here, because d4 check wins a piece. And this knight doesn't want to move, because knight e4 check is always going to be the answer. So in retrospect, I think I would have been justified in playing that, even though I thought at the time that rook takes was objectively better. Okay, so they did this. Maybe white should refrain from playing bishop takes c5 in favor of something more solid. The engine likes a3 or king g2, just hide the king. Yeah, I'd be looking to make progress on the queen side. I sort of like the plan of trying to prepare b4, but maybe white can shut it down. And I'd probably be looking at playing like a5, knight a4, eventually b4 somehow. But it's not going to be easy. As long as white doesn't continue deluding themselves with the possibility of a king side attack and instead kind of switch to defense on the queen side, they should be okay. But you can kind of tell from even the play later on, it's like white, it just seemed like they felt like they could do something on the king side. So white took the knight, I took with check, and then king f3, and this is just clearly bad. I mean, there's no reason to go to f3 over g2. It shows a lack of danger, lack of sense of danger from white. I don't know. Maybe they wanted queen g2 and g4. That's the only reason I could think of for playing this move. But d4 is just a straightforward answer, and now queen d5 is on the agenda. White has to scramble for a defense. I thought they should play king g2 and just admit that they made a mistake. Yeah, and here I can take, and white has weak pawns. I was thinking bishop a3 maybe to attack this. Still looking very good for black. I think when white gives up that dark square bishop, it's imperative that they keep the position closed. If they allow black to open the position too fast, it could be over in a matter of moves. Yeah, and g4 I think compounds the problem. So here I played d3. Yeah, and the only issue I said was my time management. I felt like I had so many good options that I was running a risk of falling way behind on the clock, deciding between good options. I think my instincts were correct, though. Like, this g5 move is totally playable and a good way to create a bunch of tension when white's king is in the crosshairs. It's a cool idea. I could have done it right here, I guess. Yeah, g5. But d3 was probably okay as well. Hard move to pass up, hitting the queen with tempo. So white played here. Yes, vindication. The engine likes it. g5. And the stakes are just higher for white. I know I'm exposing my own king, but the stakes are higher for white with their king on f3. That's just misplaced, and look at this position from white's point of view. When black plays g5, that's not a happy king. It has no sanctuary to the left here, going to the e file. The g file, it's pretty similar, so it's just caught right in the line of fire. I still have queen d5 options. Too much. So white responded by taking. Yeah, and they didn't spend much time on that. I think objectively white realized that their position is just lost here, and they wanted to play quickly and maybe try to confuse me. It's not a bad strategy. You can't shed too many tears over a lost position when there's a time element to consider. Often your best strategy is just to play quickly and hope you can get your opponent in some tough spot. Yeah, now rook f1. Here I spent some time as well, didn't I? Yep. Over 30 seconds figuring out what to do here. The engine says king h8 is best. Okay, so just vacating the g file. This pawn is no longer pinned. And what if they play something like king here? Take.
Check.
So if... whoa, sorry about that. I grabbed the edge of the board when I didn't mean to. So if take, rook takes, white's king is out on f4, check. And we're on the verge of a forced mate, it looks like. King g3, queen g6 check, king h3, queen h5. Check. Probably at some point I'm going to play rook c8. Yeah, like right now. And then this rook is coming over. White's king is laid bare. That's over. So as you can see, multiple ways to get at white's king.
Check.
I chose this, king here, and now take on f4. Right, so in order to avoid losing the queen, white must play king h3, check, and defend their queen at the same time.
Check.
And then I was going to do this, and then take here. And I'm up 2 pawns. Rook e2 check is a threat. They don't have time to take this because I win the knight. So the only question would be the clock at that point. Whether I can win before time runs out. But instead, white hung their queen, and that was game over. Okay, well, I think this game was, intriguing to a point. It's interesting to see how black should react to king f2. I think I did a decent job, but then again, I didn't play it perfectly. I could have played c takes d4 a move sooner, and I didn't see that idea involving knight c5. That was cool. And from White's point of view, I think they just played too many optimistic and superficial moves at certain moments. There was no move that was like an outright blunder. Maybe king f3. I mean, that move was pretty bad, but it was more just a culmination of some superficial moves that White made. I mean, you could kind of see even in their choice of queen b5, White needs to clean up moves like that. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another one. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.